Thank you, Sean, and thank you all for the opportunity to address you all tonight. It's a real treat, and I found myself this last 5 minutes thinking, you know, if we could just, after every election cycle, have Melvin Moran address the legislators here in Oklahoma after the election in the Oklahoma House and Senate, I think that, Mike, your job and the job of your staff and the executive board would be a lot easier. Because everything Melvin talked about is what so many people who serve in elective office forget about the oil and gas industry in the state of Oklahoma. It's easy to pull up and find out how many companies we have. It's easy to figure out how many jobs are provided by the oil and gas industry. It's easy to calculate how many dollars are impacted and are part of our state's revenues. But it's the impact on the state. It's the impact on communities all across Oklahoma. It's the impact on families and the people who work for you all, and giving those families a chance to send kids to college or to let them do things that they had not imagined possible previously, that changes Oklahoma. And I'm fortunate that I grew up in Stevens County, still own my home there. I'm fortunate that I grew up in a county where the oil and gas industry was just as important in my county as it is to the state of Oklahoma, which made my transition to the office of state representative a lot easier, because I knew the oil and gas producers in my community, in my house district. In fact, before I was even a judge, my law practice was oil and gas law. I worked with a firm, and what I did was drilling side opinions and division order opinions, and I thought that was the best kind of law to practice because it was all about making money for other people. I always say that just so many people know that I wasn't a trial lawyer, I was an oil and gas lawyer. But it was good because I wanted to practice oil and gas, so I knew there weren't a lot of women that were involved in that field. I checked records for lease brokers to help pay my way through law school. I still have family who are actively engaged in the oil and gas industry. My brother runs our family business, a title company in Stevens and Grady counties. Some of you, as I look around this room, over the years have spent time either getting my dad to help you when he was alive or working in our companies as well, coming in and doing work. You see, I grew up with a dad who believed if you guys needed work, or if the record checkers or lease brokers that worked with you needed work, he'd open the doors early in the day, he'd open them on Saturdays, he'd stay late, as long as you didn't interfere with his tea time. But he told me, he taught us by that example, that the oil and gas industry was important in Oklahoma, and it was important to help people make a living in that field. And so as a member of the legislature, I'm proud of a record that I believe has supported you every time there was an issue. Even when there was division between OIPA and perhaps some of the majors, my record has been for the people that I knew best, which were the independent producers of my state, of my county, of my district. And so I have continued to see how important you are as we have moved forward in the last number of years. Technology has changed so much. When I was in law school, Dana, I worked for a law firm in Oklahoma City, and I used to use matte pencils to color exhibits for the Corporation Commission. We've come a long way since then. But you know, that has also allowed your business to thrive. It has allowed you to be able to invest more. It's allowed you to be able to recoup greater production. It has allowed you to be able to help more people, even at times when the rest of our economy seemed to go south. You can't control the prices, but you have worked hard to keep people employed. And when you have kept people employed in Oklahoma, you have kept many communities alive. You haven't just helped fund scholarships, you haven't just helped fund philanthropies, you haven't just helped your own employees, you have given opportunities to others, because many of you are the lifeblood of your communities. Not everybody's from Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Melvin's one of the best examples of making a commitment to a community and staying there. And I appreciate that part of what you all do. You see, as we move forward in the next few years, I think it's important for Oklahoma to continue to be a leader in the oil and gas industry. It is one of our foundational industries in our state. agriculture being the other one. It doesn't provide as much money for our budget as you all, but it's still part of Oklahoma's heritage. And so as we continue to figure out how we want Oklahoma to look at the end of her second 100 years, I want to be in a state that has laid a foundation for Oklahoma to continue to be a leader, if not the leader, in what happens in the energy industry. And I know that that means that we have to think about how we can expand our domestic resources. We cannot just totally rely on oil and gas, or else we will continue to have heavy reliance on foreign resources. And I just don't think that's acceptable. I don't think that's good for Oklahoma, and I don't think that's good for the United States. I believe in renewable energies. I'm a supporter of wind power, but it's never, ever going to replace the energy industry, the oil and gas industry in Oklahoma. But if we can come up with some other ways, like solar or wind, and I think wind has more potential in Oklahoma than solar does, if we have an opportunity to add those different folders to our energy portfolio, I think it gives us a chance to become stronger. As governor, I would like to see Oklahoma develop an energy plan, and I would like to not just see a state's energy plan, but I would like to see Oklahoma engage with governors of other energy-producing states and create a synergy among those of us who really and truly rely and understand on what you do. And let's figure out a way that the state can take the lead. And over a multi-year plan, let's move toward getting our state fleets, those vehicles where it's appropriate. Let's move them to a CNG. Let's move them to an opportunity so we can say, we have these numbers of vehicles in our state, which will drive the need for more of those fueling stations. And when we do that, then we begin to not wonder which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Do we have more cars? Do we have the fueling stations? Let's do it, but let's develop a plan and set it out in motion so that regardless who leads this state after 8 years, 4 years, 12 years, whatever the time is, that there's a plan in place that people can step in and continue to follow. I think that gives you some predictability as you can begin to figure out what the vision is for your particular company and how this association plays a part in shaping what Oklahoma Next looks like. We have to figure out a way to maximize domestic fuels in our country. Oklahoma can be the leader in saying, here's what we're doing as a state. Our size makes us a good size to be able to deal with it. We have the best minds on energy in Oklahoma. We need to keep them here. We don't need to just train them and send them from our colleges and universities to other states. I want to be able to help make sure that you understand that this industry and this association has a long, long future, and that you can make sure that you are putting into place those plans to make sure your employees and their children and their grandchildren, if they want to be a part of the energy of Oklahoma, that they believe they can do it, and they can do it here in Oklahoma. Many of your companies are already multi-generational. What a great legacy. What a great legacy. We don't need to lose that. We need to expand it. We need to make sure it happens even bigger and better. And when we do, then I am convinced 10 years from now, 25 years from now, 50 years from now, the next Wildcat or Hall of Fame will have the same kind of resume, the same kind of contributions, not just to your industry, but to the state of Oklahoma as the man you have honored tonight. I look forward to helping you chart that course. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sean, for that great introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. And let me just first of all say, Fallin, much deserved. You and your family and all that you've done for the state of Oklahoma, whether it's been your work in the oil and gas industry, your philanthropy to our state, and so many different lives that you touched. So congratulations. And it's a great pleasure to be here with you tonight to talk to the OIPA and to talk about the future of the energy sector in our state, even in our nation, and certainly about the future of the state of Oklahoma. I know that you have over 2,000 members statewide who've been very active in energy policy, very active on the state level and the federal level will. So I appreciate the strength of your organization and look forward to working with you. When I was a young girl, I had the opportunity to work in the oil industry for a short time. In my early years, my husband was a landman in his early years. He has some leasing. We're still waiting for some of those leases to go into production, maybe make some money someday. When I was in the Congress, I had the opportunity to serve on behalf of the Republican leadership on the House Energy Action Team during the height of the cap-and-trade debate in Washington. There were about 10 of us that were selected by Congressman Boehner to serve on that team to hold national press conferences to debate on the floor of Congress about energy policy and the things that we were discussing in Washington and how that would affect the industry itself. I also had the opportunity to serve on the Natural Resources Committee in Congress, and certainly we had a lot of interesting policy discussions on my years on that committee. So the energy sector is not something new to me, something that I've just started paying attention to. It's something that I have had a strong interest in. And I will tell you that unlike, I think, our current administration with President Obama, I believe that the energy industry is an ally to America, not an enemy to America. And I will also tell you that I believe that the success of the energy sector in our state and in our nation is vital to our economic recovery and even vital to our national security. You heard Melvin talk about the importance of the oil and gas industry and our producers in our state. Almost 300,000 Oklahomans have a job related to the energy sector, 1 out of 7 jobs. He talked about that, contributing over $1 billion to almost $1 billion to our state's economy. We know how important it is to Oklahoma, to our jobs, to our state revenue, to the operations of government itself, to providing essential services in Oklahoma. So the oil and gas industry is a friend to Oklahoma. It's a very important part of our economy. It's a very important part of our sector. And Oklahoma has certainly done its role in its production of oil and gas and energy. So I want to tell you that my goal as governor, if I have the opportunity to serve in this capacity, is to do all that I can to stimulate the growth of the oil and gas industry in our state. Because Oklahoma's already been a leader in this industry, but I believe we can be even a better leader, a bigger leader, not only for our state, but certainly for our nation. I'm going to do everything that I can to produce energy in our state, to encourage especially what we like to talk about in Washington, clean energy, which I believe is also natural gas. We have some tremendous opportunities in that particular realm. And I will support the legislature whenever they take steps, as they have over the last couple of years, in creating incentives for production. Whether it is incentives for fleet conversion, whether it's incentives for more conversion of companies, or whether it is just incentives for production of alternative energy, biodiesel fuels, research, development, partnerships, supporting those types of things will certainly be something that I will be for. And maintaining some of the great incentives that we already have on our books in Oklahoma for the industry. And then I will tell you that I think we have to have a fair regulatory environment. I know Corporation Commissioner Dana Murphy and I were talking a few moments ago about the role the Corporation Commission plays in making sure that the regulatory environment is right so that we can encourage more production and development. We have some great research being done in the state, some great partnerships between the public and the private sector, between OU, OSU, the Noble Foundation on biofuel development. It's a great opportunity for Oklahoma going forward. And of course, I will tell you that I support hydraulic fracturing. I am for that. I don't like what Washington is trying to do with the EPA and trying to stop what I believe is a safe, reliable form of production for Oklahoma. And I do not support what Speaker Pelosi and what President Obama have been doing in trying to take away the industry's ability for tangible drilling assets, for also depletion allowances. I believe that will kill the industry, that will certainly hurt production. So I am going to be a governor who will stand up when I believe that the policies we're seeing out of Washington would be bad for an important energy sector in our state. I will stand up on that and speak on behalf of your industry. Now, I want to tell you why I'm running for governor, and I want to tell you what my priorities will be. Well, first of all, my priority for governor will be to get Oklahoma's economy back on track, to create jobs, to focus on creating the very best business environment so that companies will have the ability to be able to invest and be able to get a good rate of return for their businesses. And what that means is keeping your taxes low. It means doing more workers' compensation reform. It means doing more lawsuit reform. It means having a fair regulatory environment. And I have a long track record in history of doing those things. When I was Lieutenant Governor, you might remember that I had the Fallin Commission on workers' compensation reform. And we did pass some major workers' compensation reform back then. I took over the Senate, Mike. You didn't like this one, but I took over the Senate on right to work. And we were able to get that bill passed there during that time. I also worked with the legislature, talking about the importance of lawsuit reform and how frivolous lawsuits could kill business and kill investment and kill our economy. And then focusing on education, making sure that you have the educated workforce that you need to be able to fill the jobs that you have, that our children can read and write and do the things, the basic things, that they need for your industry, plus those advanced degrees. And we have some great programs throughout Oklahoma in advanced degrees. The second pillar of my platform as governor is going to make sure that government is responsible with the money it spends. To ask all of our agency heads to look at their mission to see if it's still relevant for the day, if it's cost efficient, if it's effective, and if it's not, then we're going to change things in the state of Oklahoma. I will demand on day one that every agency look at what they do and that they're going to be accountable for how they spend our money. It's our taxpayer money, it's our businesses' money. And then the third thing, the last thing I want to talk to you about in my administration is that when it comes time to stand up for Oklahoma and to stand up against Washington, when they do things that I believe will hurt Oklahoma's economy, will hurt businesses, will hurt the energy sector, to hurt our families, I will be a leader, because I already have been, that will stand up and say, Mr. President, Speaker Pelosi, cap and trade is bad for Oklahoma. Putting new energy taxes on our energy sector will kill jobs, kill investment, will hurt Oklahoma's economy. I will stand up and do those kinds of things because I already have. And that's the type of leader that I will be. And if the EPA gets out of hand by doing things they shouldn't do that will hurt energy production in our state, I will certainly be a strong voice that will voice my opinion on things like that. So I wanted to share with you some of my goals as governor, to tell you the kind of leader that I will be, and to frankly just ask for your support. Ask for your support as we're moving through. And if I'm fortunate enough to be able to serve as your next governor of the state of Oklahoma, I want you to know that I value what the OIPA does. I value your leadership on issues, and you'll have an open door with me. Thank you so much.
What is your position on State Question 744 and why?
I am opposed to State Question 744 because it raises taxes. I believe will raise taxes on government, or else we'll have to cut state services.
Hold on a minute. We probably ought to. Why don't you explain what State Question 744 is? Some of our people may not know what that is.
Okay, thank you, Mike. State Question 744 is a ballot initiative that will be on the November ballot this year that basically says Oklahoma will spend the regional average of the states around us for education. So we're basically comparing Oklahoma to other states. And of course, other states have different types of tax structures, they have different economies, they have different costs of living, they have different priorities in their budget. So we're going to be saying that Oklahoma has to do what everybody else is doing. And so I'm opposed to State Question 744. It says on the ballot initiative that it does not raise taxes, which I believe is a little deceptive because there is no funding mechanism in the state ballot for State Question 744. It has been estimated that it will cost the state of Oklahoma around $850 million to come out of our current budget at a time when we've almost, well, we will be probably experiencing about $1 billion shortfall. We've already had $1.2 billion shortfall this past year. So if you take $850 million in new spending, another maybe $1 billion in shortfall, that's a huge shortfall. So there are two ways of dealing with that. One is you either increase taxes to pay for that, or you cut government services even further. I'm for making government smaller, smarter, more efficient, but I'm very concerned with the budget shortfall with this huge new spending increase that it would devastate other essential government services like roads and bridges, healthcare, all the other things that we fund, corrections, law enforcement. And so I do not support it. And plus, I will say this, the main fact is it has no education reform. It will not improve education. There's no reform language in there to fix some of the things that we need to fix in education.
That's correct. It will absolutely devastate the current the budget if we even have no new revenues. We're already looking to an additional 1.2 to 1.4 or 1.6 billion dollars less revenue to begin this next fiscal year because the current budget had that much in one-time revenue enhancers. So you add down the future $800+ million that would go into the classroom. However laudable that amount may be, it absolutely eliminates the ability of the legislature and certainly the governor as chief executive officer to help direct some of the policies of the state. So our position from the beginning has been 744 may be intended well, but it is not. It's got unintended consequences that will absolutely keep Oklahoma from moving ahead like we need to.
It has to be addressed to us.
Any other OIPA? Okay.
There seems to have been a great deal of discussion about whether we're going to have massive centralized government from on the federal level, or the function of the state governments in addressing the issues. So, I'd like you both to address that.
Delighted to. You know, because of my background, it's not been unusual for me to oppose my political party. It's not been unusual for me to be, when I was with the parole board, I was often the one no vote among the others. So I'm kind of used to being in the minority and standing up and having to speak my piece. Part of the reason that I think Oklahoma needs to have a voice, a vocal, an energetic leader is someone who is willing and able to get both the congressional delegation from Oklahoma, the Oklahoma legislature, and other state leaders and bring them together to help create the synergy for us to be able to stand up to say, we don't like what's going on in Congress, we don't like what's going on in Washington, D.C., we don't like what the federal government is doing to the state of Oklahoma. Most of the policies that we've seen passed in the last several years have not at all had anything to do with helping Oklahoma. Their focus has been states with a larger population, more electoral votes, places where those who are elected officials serving in D.C. think they need to cater. Doesn't work in Oklahoma. We have to stand up and fight for ourselves. I truly believe Oklahomans can do a better job of taking care of Oklahoma. Just give me the chance.
Well, after spending the last 4 years in Washington, now I want to come home. And I definitely want to come home. But I will tell you this, that Washington's way is not Oklahoma's way. Washington's way is more big government controlling many different facets of life, whether it's been our healthcare system, whether it's talking about interference in the oil industry with cap and trade, climate change, whether it is even not dealing with immigration and trying to keep our nation safe. You know, Washington's way is more big spending, more government intrusion into our private lives, into our businesses and our industry. And I've been standing up and fighting that and been very vocal as not only a lieutenant governor, but certainly as a congresswoman. You know, when I talk to businesses around Oklahoma, they tell me we are sitting on cash, we're not employing people, we're not expanding our businesses because we are so worried about what the federal government is going to do to our business. Whether it is President Obama's health care bill, which I oppose, whether it's the talk just this past week of President Obama initiating another big stimulus package after we've already had a big stimulus package and we have 14 million Americans still unemployed and huge high unemployment rate. And the new stimulus package, there was rumor it's going to be funded upon new energy taxes, which would further make us have recession issues and certainly hurt Oklahoma. You know, what we're seeing is people who believe that we just spend our way to prosperity. And so businesses are sitting on the sidelines saying, I'm not willing to invest, I'm not willing to create jobs because I'm worried about what's coming out of DC. And then, of course, we have the Bush tax cuts that are going to be expiring this year, and I don't know what Speaker Pelosi and President Obama are going to do in that. My guess is probably nothing. They'll expire. And so in January, you're going to see a lot of taxes going up, and as taxes go up, then we, once again, will have a slow economic recovery. So I'm very concerned about that, and as governor, I will speak up and lead on that.
You look forward to the first year in office and a $1 billion shortfall. Just in kind of broad strokes, where do you see the cuts coming in our state government?
Well, there's no doubt that we've had challenges this past year with having to balance our budget. We had a $1.2 billion budget shortfall last year. They took a combination of rainy day funds and combination of stimulus funds, which are depleted, rainy day funds almost empty too, some cash reserve funds, cut government spending, which I'm always for making government smaller, smarter, more efficient, but we've done that. And now we're looking at, as we just both discussed, another budget shortfall this year. And if State Question 744 passes, then we got huge problems for state government. So that's one of the reasons why I said as governor, one of the things I'm going to do is focus on jobs, the economy, making us more business friendly, doing the things that will not only keep businesses here, but attract businesses to our state. The energy sector certainly can play a large role in helping us grow our economy. But what are we going to do if we're still in a bad economy? And I think what I will do as governor is to start out the legislative session, and actually I'm going to start before the legislative session once election day is over, and looking at balancing our budget and setting our priorities first, whether it is education, whether it's law enforcement, corrections, roads and bridges, healthcare needs, setting those priorities first, dealing with the budgetary issues up front in the legislative session, not getting sidetracked and some other social type issues, because the economy and putting Oklahomans back to work and making us more business friendly as a state should be our first priority, trying to get the state back on track, and certainly balancing our budget and putting it towards important needs.
I'm glad you like that idea, because I've been talking about that for a couple of months now. The two things we need to do. First and foremost, there's no reason that the Oklahoma legislature, there's no changes in laws for them to come in and be able to say, we're going to put the budget priorities first. And let's let every member of the legislature be on an appropriations subcommittee, 101 House members, 48 senators. Senate often used to do that, so they're used to it. And then let's let those members of the legislature work with the agencies and figure out where their budgets can be cut, instead of letting agency heads get an amount of money and then them deciding where those cuts should be. Because sometimes agencies will make those cuts across the board, or sometimes they'll decide to cut a program that they know will send en masse a large group of people to the Capitol to protest that that budget cut occurred. That's not necessarily the best way for us to make budget decisions. It's not the way you do it in your businesses. So this first legislative session, when times are tough, let's change the practice, and instead of announcing how much money at the end of session is going to be appropriated, let's do it from the beginning. And let's see how much we can get done. And I bet you find more legislators involved in the process, you have more agency heads answering more difficult questions about where their money's going, and you'll come out with a better budget and one that can be explained to the citizens of Oklahoma. The second thing we do to make that more important long term is we ask the legislature to send to a vote of the people a state question to allow Oklahoma to do a 2-year budget cycle. We know that there are other states that pay their light bills and have an opportunity. Thank you. I had nothing to do with that. But I'll take credit for coming back on. We know that there are other states that do 2-year budget cycles. Texas does that. Their budget is way bigger than Oklahoma's, and I have confidence that if that is what's required of us, that we will have the expertise in our legislative body and in the executive branch to be able to come up with a 2-year budget cycle. But let's change it in the Constitution, a 2-year budget cycle, and every other year a budget-only session. There's no question you have emergency valves in there in case there's something that comes up. But let's get in the practice of every other year only dealing with budget issues. Let's look at longer-term forecasting than we do right now. What else would I do? We're operating under a 1947 Budget Act right now. I would like for us, those of us who are involved on the Board of Equalization, I think we need to review how we actually come up with our estimates. Unfortunately, it really and truly is a little guy that sits in the basement of the tax commission that does different econometric models to help figure out from the different sectors of our revenues what can be projected, what's the best forecast in those areas. I think we need to look at that. Let's make sure we have the best econometric models that can be used. We may find that there are certain segments, as I believe was discussed in this last session, that there may be segments that other states have to do a better job in forecasting certain segments of revenue. Let's look at that. Let's make sure that we're confident when we make those forecasts that we're going to be on target, so that barring some natural or man-made disaster, we don't set up our budget, our revenues, our appropriations to take a great hit like they have the last few years.
We've had some workman's comp reform in the last 4 years, but I'll tell you as a contractor, we have a long ways to go eliminating some of the fraud in the system. I want to know what specific things you would do as governor to make some changes in the workman's comp system.
I would continue to try to do promote some of the issues that I have promoted as the state representative. One, I do believe that it's important that judges that are appointed, I come from a judicial background, so for me, the people that are going to be appointed as judges better be people who have a good understanding of the law. It doesn't matter whether you're a plaintiff's attorney or respondent's attorney. I hear people, depending on however many judges have been appointed by whatever administration, saying things are swinging too far one way and too far the other. Justice should not be that way. Justice should be more balanced and in the middle and more certain. And when you do that, I think you have a better opportunity to see greater success in mediation. Anything we can do to remove our system from being as adversarial as it is good for the state of Oklahoma. It's good for working men and women. It's good for getting injured workers back to work faster. I think we also can do some things that I believe help some of our smaller businesses. A lot of our small manufacturing companies, a lot of them don't know how to plug into some of the resources to know how to make their workplace even safer. And whether it is through the Department of Labor's, Oklahoma Department of Labor's program, whether it's through some of the programs through the Workers' Comp Court itself, or whether it's through our career tech systems, we have seen significant improvements when some of those companies have spent time with those who know how to do safety programs and helping reduce the issues that go on that give rise to injuries later on. I believe that being less adversarial, I have no idea how the reforms that were passed this last year are going to play out. They're just now, I guess they come into effect probably some of November. I'm not exactly sure. But we know that there are reforms that were passed. They claimed, everybody in the legislature claimed they were good, but it usually takes us 2 or 3 years to see the benefit because you have to go through a premium year to be able to see whether there's been significant changes in the statistics to allow NCCI to start talking about what we've saved. So even though we passed it, I don't think we see benefit of it for 2 to 3 years down the road. Oklahoma has seen a reduction in the number of claims, but an increase in the amount of those judgments that are awarded. Medical costs are part of that. Medical costs are part of that. As we all know, medical costs are rising. But we have got to figure out a way to not delay treatment to an injured worker so they can get back to work and do what you want them to do. Most workers and employers can get that done themselves if we give them a forum that's not adversarial to do that.
Workers' compensation reform has been an issue I've worked on for a very long time. As I mentioned, in 1997-98, I had the Fallin Commission on Workers' Compensation Reform, and we spent about a year looking at the workers' compensation system from top down and rewrote a lot of the laws. We did pass it, and it was signed into law by Governor Keating, and after that time that it passed, the number of injuries in our state did drop, and we saw a lot of great improvement with waste and fraud within the system itself. But I would tell you, I think one of the best ways to help do workers' compensation reform and to lower costs is to elect a conservative governor who will appoint conservative judges, frankly. And that is something that I will do. I think it's one of the big problems in the state of Oklahoma is the judges that we have on our system. A lot of the businesses I talk to tell me they just show up at court, they get an award, the injured workers will. And they tell me they'll have injured workers who are on drugs, that have some type of injury, and they get hurt on the job, and they still get an award. They tell me that the award claims have gone up 3 times what they used to be in the court system itself. And so the system needs new judges, first of all. That will help tremendously. And I think looking at some of the ways that we have fraud and waste abuse in our system, where there's the drug abuse itself, where there's just automatic awards that seem to be given on disabilities, those are some of the areas that I would work on. And I think we have to address the high cost of workers' compensation. We're 41st in the nation in that area. I will tell you, my husband's actually a workers' comp defense attorney. And he told me when we got married, he said, "What did you do to scare the trial lawyers?" And I said, "What do you mean, honey?" He said, "They're scared to death of you. They don't want you elected governor because they're worried what you're going to do to reform workers' comp." So that's all right, let them be scared.
Our industry has developed technologies that have unlocked vast new reserves of natural gas. What will you do as governor to ensure that Oklahoma develops the infrastructure so that our good friend Robert Henry can fill up his new CNG car?
Well, the legislature passed some good legislation over the last couple of years that would encourage more use of natural gas, that adds some tax incentives for fleet conversion. I know OSU's doing a great job. Hope that you guys will do this on your campus, but OSU's actually building a fuel station, and they're converting all their fleet to natural gas vehicles. We have some incentives for car conversion. We have some incentives for private sector conversion for natural gas vehicles. We have some incentives on the book for infrastructure development throughout our state. The legislature passed some legislation just this past session that said that their goal was to have about 100 have a fuel station every 100 miles in the state of Oklahoma by a certain year. I think it may have been 2015, and then they had some other goals going further out in years. So keep those incentives in place for natural gas and the use of it. Speaker Pelosi is always talking about how we got to have clean energy, and natural gas is one of the greatest sources of clean energy. It's abundant in our nation. It helps us, I believe, create more jobs, help our economic recovery. I'm for reducing our dependence upon foreign energy, and using American energy does that. And so I will be a governor who will support all the different forms of legislation that we've already passed. I know there was a renewable energy legislation that was passed to try to get more natural gas use and electricity production. Those things, I support those type of goals.
I think we have to continue to build the demand. It's a supply and demand, and if we can create a belief in the state of Oklahoma that those vehicles, where appropriate, can be converted to something, to CNG. I've actually seen around the state capitol, some of our maintenance vehicles are actually now some electric vehicles, and I think all of that is a good opportunity to begin to move ourselves from less than the, 60% of foreign oil that the United States relies on. Everything we can do to change that statistic helps Oklahoma. But I think our infrastructure goes beyond just creating cars, those kinds of vehicles that demand, as well as the fueling stations. I think it is important that we make sure that the business infrastructure, that whether it's the regulatory infrastructure of our own Oklahoma Corporation Commission or whatever laws that the Oklahoma legislature may be looking at, that they are also growth friendly, that they are CNG, our industry friendly, that we help develop a plan for our state to be able to say, okay, maybe some of the rules, maybe some of the laws that we have on the books were really appropriate when we've been just exploring for oil. But maybe as we are beginning to use the horizontal drilling and seeing the success, maybe there are laws on our books that we need to change to be able to make them more friendly to this gas exploration. The shales in the state of Oklahoma that are being developed right now are beyond what anybody thought about 10 years ago. We haven't changed our laws to keep up with that. So that's also part of an infrastructure that we have to be able to change to make sure that we are open-armed, open-handed, and friendly to the industry that's putting money into this state.